Hi, I'm Susan Downs, and welcome to the Silicon Valley Health Institute. We're a nonprofit organization where we want to bring you health information so you can be proactive in your health and move your health toward optimal health. It's not a matter of just having the average values or values that are normal. The normalcy, let's use that word, is based on 95% of the people in this country, or wherever, and these people are generally very sick. So having normal values is not the thing to aim for. Maybe values in the middle might be a little better, but we want to aim toward optimal health, which is not based on having normal lab values. So to do that, we bring expert speakers, and today we have Tim Jackson. He's a doctor of physical therapy and orthopedic rehabilitation and a functional medicine provider. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in health science and chemistry from Wake University. He served clients in over 15 countries through his telehealth practice, and that can be found at www.healyourbody.org. And he's helped thousands over the last 8 years, so we're glad to have him. He's the creator of Heal Your Hormones, a boot camp for neurosurgeon Dr. Jack Cruz's membership community, and has contributed to the book Diagnostic Testing in Functional Medicine by Amir Rozek. He's been featured in the Huffington Post, the Bulletproof Executive, Ben Greenfield Fitness podcast, on multiple health and medical summits, and in 2 health documentaries. He hosts the Bus Body podcast. He also serves on the medical advisory board for Wellness Mama, a site with several million annual visitors. He's available for comment on various functional medicine and wellness related topics such as digestive health, energy, fatigue, autoimmune diseases, and mold toxicity. So welcome, Dr. Jackson. We're lucky to have you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Downs. I really appreciate it. I'm happy to be here. I'm very passionate about the mitochondria and how optimizing them can help us become more present and successful in our lives, however we choose to define success. So I titled my slide deck, Mitochondria, the Key to Health and Happiness. Pretty much, in high school biology, we learned that the mitochondria are the batteries of the cells, and that's true, but they do so much more than that. And we're going to get into a lot of detail, but I want to also give you a lot of practical and actionable information. And it's not necessarily the most expensive stuff. A lot of times it's going to be very simple things and interventions to help optimize the health of your mitochondria. So, definition and description. Like I said, they're the batteries of our cells. That's true. And they produce energy in the form of ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. But they also are responsible for detecting and sensing danger. And that danger can be in the form of heavy metals, stealth pathogens such as viruses. Think the past 3 years. That's one of the ways COVID negatively impacts our physiology, is by basically beating up the mitochondria. And the mitochondria also detect when we have things like mold toxicity and even psychological and emotional stress. So when that happens, when we have one of those physiological perturbations or homeostatic perturbations, the mitochondria decrease the amount of energy they're producing. And I want you to kind of reframe the way you think about energy. It's not just going to lift weights or run 2 miles. Sleep is a very energy intensive process, which is counterintuitive. You think if you boost the mitochondria that you're going to have difficulty sleeping. And occasionally that's true, but it also usually improves sleep because there's such a high concentration of mitochondria in the brain and central nervous system, which we're going to get into more detail about in just a minute. But the mitochondria, they produce ATP, or energy in the cell, and they detect threats. So this is something called the cell danger response. It's Dr. Robert Navio out of UC Irvine, if I'm not mistaken. He published a paper on this about 6 or 7 years ago, and now it's sort of becoming part of our vernacular in functional medicine. But everyday energy, when we talk about energy and we have low energy or good energy or optimal energy, how does that impact our physiology? Well, when energy is low, your body's going to prioritize all the biochemical reactions that help us stay alive. So there's sort of a hierarchy of needs, if you will. And so our bodies don't know anything about looking good in a bathing suit or, being able to bench press 315 pounds. It knows survival. And so your body's always trying to help you. It's not working against you. And I think that's one of the misnomers that sort of came over from allopathic medicine. And so where are these mitochondria and why should you care about them? Well, they're in every cell of the body except for red blood cells. So you're going to have different concentrations in different tissues of the body. So if we talk about why should you care about the mitochondria, well, if you want to age gracefully, you want to be stronger and have better endurance, be able to have greater memory or improved memory, or increased cognitive prowess, think faster, have better recall. All of those things require healthy mitochondria. And so I think back to my days in cell and molecular biology, and if they would have just told me, how important the mitochondria were and how I could use it to improve my quality of life, I would have had a much more enjoyable time in cell and molecular biology and biochemistry. But it was just sort of this esoteric part of the cells. Yeah, it's kind of important. You don't really know what it does. And that's really it. Just memorize it for the test. But now we have certain therapies and modalities that target the mitochondria that can help us have an improved and increased quality of life and health-related quality of life. So much more than energy production, we can see here, the first arrow directly above the mitochondria circle is generate energy. But we also have our neurotransmitter metabolism. So that's just brain chemistry, the feel-good chemicals, serotonin, dopamine, GABA, acetylcholine. We have apoptosis or programmed cell death, ammonia detoxification, heme synthesis, cholesterol metabolism, breaking down food and fat and carbohydrates into energy, and synthesizing a lot of the molecules involved in DNA synthesis. And the mitochondrial DNA, so the mitochondria have their own DNA. So when we talk about, general DNA, that's in the nucleus of the cell, which is in the center. The mitochondria, it does not have that double helix that we know about. It actually has a circle of DNA. And we used to think we just got our mitochondrial DNA from mom, but now we know that dad also contributes. And that paper came out about 1.5 to 2 years ago. So it's kind of like, the first day of your doctorate program or medical school, they tell you, 50% of what we teach you is going to be wrong. We just don't know which 50%. Well, it turns out this was part of that 50%. So all this slide is saying is that your mitochondria do a lot more than just produce energy. You can see up here, estrogen and testosterone synthesis. So if hormone levels are low, then if you optimize the mitochondria, in general, everything else being the same, that will improve your hormone levels. Now it's bidirectional, meaning it can go either way, but you can never go wrong by trying to optimize the health of your mitochondria. If we look at most chronic diseases today, almost all of them have a very strong mitochondrial dysfunction component. Now, if you ask a traditional allopathic doctor about the mitochondria, they're going to say, oh, well, did you send the patient for a muscle biopsy? They think of sort of the ends of the continuum, but 95% of us are in the middle here. And so the ends, yeah, they're important, but if we only pay attention to the ends, then you're going to leave a lot of people suffering. So we talked about, I mentioned that I'm going to speak about the concentration of mitochondria per organ or organ system. So the brain has a very high concentration of mitochondria. It has around 9% of the body's mitochondria, and they consume about 20 to 22% of the oxygen that we breathe in. So one of the first places or areas that you notice mitochondrial dysfunction is actually brain fog, memory issues, sleep issues, concentration issues, and more specifically, the retina in the eye. So remember, the eyes are still neurological tissue. They're outside of the brain, but still all neurological tissue. And so the retina technically has the highest concentration of any region in the body. Next up on the docket is the cardiovascular system. So if I have a knob here, a stereo knob, and I turn it down, and that's the mitochondrial energy production, you might get heart palpitations, hypertension, you may go into atrial fibrillation, any number of cardiac abnormalities. And that's why you hear cardiologists, especially functional medicine cardiologists, talking about the importance of coenzyme Q10, things like L-carnitine. These are what we call substrates, just molecules that the mitochondria needs to produce energy. So our bodies make coenzyme Q10, but when we're under stress, the body stops producing as much. And so supplementation can be helpful. It can sometimes be a little pricey, but in terms of an antioxidant and improving cardiovascular health, this is a go-to supplement. Dr. Mark Houston, who's the head of the Hypertension Institute at Vanderbilt, he gives his patients a choice of supplementation or going the traditional allopathic route. And the last I heard him speak, about 95 to 98% choose the integrative medicine route because they just don't get results with the traditional statin-only therapy. So the cardiovascular system, very high concentration of mitochondria. Skeletal muscle also has a very high concentration. So in a minute, we're going to see a photo of someone who has optimal mitochondrial health and then someone who has pretty poor mitochondrial health. And it's sort of to drive home this point. And then the liver, obviously, it's a very metabolically active organ. It's doing a lot, about 800 different biochemical reactions, a lot of filtration. So it needs a lot of energy. So again, we're back to that concept of energy. And so the liver has a high concentration of mitochondria. I'm going to check the chat real quick to see if I'm making sure there wasn't a question. So mitochondria as we age, we know that as we age, that we produce less energy or ATP, we produce more free radicals. So just as a normal byproduct of normal energy production, we produce some free radicals. And that's okay. But the issue becomes as we age, we produce more and more and more. And then you throw in environmental toxins and that adds some more. And so the poor mitochondria are getting beaten up like crazy. And the mitochondrial DNA that I mentioned that's circular, it is not protected by proteins called histones. So the DNA in our nucleus, the general DNA we refer to, that is protected by histones, and it basically winds up the double helix and protects it. Mitochondrial DNA does not have that. And so it's much more susceptible to damage. And that leads to mitochondria being damaged, and then those mitochondria stick around and are less efficient. And those cells don't necessarily die off right away. And so we end up getting, decreased energy production, increased oxidative stress, and it's just a vicious physiological cycle. They also produce less of something called NAD+. Now, this has exploded in popularity over the past 8 or 9 years. It stands for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. And so it's a very important molecule that's being talked about for anti-aging purposes because we know we make less of it as we age. I've gotten it in IV form before. I have colleagues who use it in a patch form, a transdermal patch. It can also be taken as a sublingual lozenge or an injection. And it helps to produce more energy. And again, not just physical energy, but mental energy, helps with detoxification. So any process in the body that requires energy, which is 99.99% of them, will benefit from more NAD plus. And so now you can even get NAD in a topical skin cream, for anti-aging purposes. So here, let's talk about someone who has optimal mitochondrial health. Now, you're probably going to read the title down here. Banned British sprinter CJ Ujay cleared of deliberately taking drugs at Olympic. So he didn't take drugs, but the point of this photo is to show you when you have good mitochondria, you're strong, you have relatively low body fat, you have lots of lean skeletal muscle tissue, and you're really fast. Okay, so kind of keep that in your mind as optimal mitochondrial health. And then here's someone in the ICU with sort of end organ dysfunction, what we call end organ dysfunction. And the more systems you have involved in someone's symptomatology, the more likely there is to be a mitochondrial component. And so, I don't foresee this happening anytime soon. And by the way, I apologize for the misspelling here. There should be an O there. But with the ICU, the ER, if we could go around and give people subcutaneous injections of NAD+, I guarantee you people would get better. I mean, you're not going to reverse anything overnight, but it certainly can only help and gives people a better chance of, the desired outcome. So how do we enhance the mitochondria? So I've told you what they are, where they are, and mostly what they do. How can we improve them though? And this is where the actionable information comes in. So it's really a 3, perhaps 4-step process. A lot of times you'll talk to integrative and functional medicine providers and they'll say, oh, yeah, you want to boost your mitochondria, just take coenzyme Q10, take molecular hydrogen. And those are aspects of protection. And the optimal substrates, that's where the coenzyme Q10 would fall. But the mitochondrial DNA, since it's susceptible to damage, it's like here's a person and you have 5 thugs who want to mug him and there's no bodyguards. Well, we got to put some bodyguards there to protect the mitochondria, help them out. And so we're going to talk about how to do that. It's relatively simple and straightforward. The mitochondria has a separate membrane. It has 2 of them, actually, an inner and an outer mitochondrial membrane. And it uses that inner and outer membrane to create a concentration gradient of protons. And those protons drive, ultimately, the cellular energy production. Last but not least, we have optimal substrates. So substrates are any molecules required for the production of energy in the mitochondria. So protection. So as I mentioned, the mitochondria, they are supposed to have 2 bodyguards in front of them. One is called glutathione. Glutathione is your body's most powerful and potent antioxidant. The other is a molecule called SOD, or superoxide dismutase. And if you've seen the infomercial with Cindy Crawford and Dr. Zabak from France with the melon, that's what's special about the melon, is it has really, really high concentrations of superoxide dismutase. And superoxide dismutase, it's like a partner in crime, so to speak, with glutathione in terms of anti-aging and protecting the mitochondria. So when we have sufficient glutathione and superoxide dismutase, the mitochondria are better protected and they function at a higher level. The issue is every time we're exposed to a stressor, remember a stressor can be environmental, physical, emotional, financial, social, spiritual, all those things. Your body uses up some glutathione. Last I checked, and this data is about 9 years old, the average baby born today has between 250 and 300 known carcinogens in the umbilical column. And that's just carcinogens. So there's vertical transmission from mom to baby. And you can imagine what this does to glutathione. It depletes it. And then every time, every breath we take, essentially, especially if we're outside and if we live near something like an airport or a factory, we're using up more glutathione. And so we got to replenish that glutathione. And then the superoxide dismutase, there are some indirect ways you can go about modulating that. It's easier to modulate glutathione, but we can also modulate superoxide dismutase. And so this falls under the protection category. What can we do to protect the mitochondria from being damaged in the first place? And that's where the glutathione, the superoxide dismutase come into play. Vitamin E is a potent antioxidant, and it doesn't get as much press as some of the others, but it's extremely important for protecting the mitochondrial membranes as well as the overall cellular membrane. So those are ways to protect the mitochondria. And we're going to talk in more detail about glutathione and how to use that. It comes in a number of forms. Then there are ways to upregulate the body's own production of it as well. There's also a supplement called carbon 60 or C60. It's been shown in studies on mice to extend lifespan by up to 25%. Now, we know it's a powerful free radical scavenger, an immune modulator, and also just an overall beneficial anti-aging supplement. So that's another option, depending on how many supplements do you want to take, what's in the budget in terms of supplementation. But I want to take a step back and talk about glutathione for a minute. So glutathione can be nebulized or put into a little nebulizing machine and breathed in through the nose. That's going to hit the brain more easily. The brain's very susceptible to free radical damage. And that's what leads to things like Parkinson's. There's a multitude of issues that lead to that, but that's one of them. And so glutathione can also be used transdermally in a cream form in the forearms. It can be used in the shot form, in IV form, or capsule form. So all those forms have their benefits. Obviously, it's not really practical to get a glutathione push every day of your life. So, and that's even for me. I was just at my friend's clinic in Idaho 2 weeks ago, and I got glutathione while I was there. And, it felt great, but I also supplement with it almost daily in the form of S-acetyl glutathione. So it's capital S dash acetyl, ACETYL, glutathione. And there are more and more companies carrying this form of glutathione. The most important thing to remember, so you don't waste your money, is to make sure you take it on an empty stomach. It won't harm you to take it with food. You just won't really receive the benefits you're expecting. But glutathione, not only does it protect the mitochondria, it's extremely important as an antiviral, an immune modulator, and detoxifier. So it's one of those 10-in-1 supplements, I like to call it, because it does so many different things. And anytime we can, kill 10 birds with one stone, I'm all for it. So we talked about the protection aspect of protecting the mitochondria. And now we got to talk about membrane rehabilitation, because environmental toxins, stress, the wrong ratio or imbalanced ratio of fats in the body lead to oxidized lipids in the membrane. And so lipids or fats, when they become oxidized, they can no longer function properly. And so, let me grab a drink of water, excuse me. When we talk about lipids that are oxidized, we can replace them. And that gets into the composition of the mitochondrial matrix, the inner membrane, which is a little less permeable, and the outer membrane, which is more permeable. And like I said, the oxidized lipids, they essentially create energy leaks. So conceptually, you can think of mitochondria as the organelles that take food and turn it into energy. if you're looking at the 30,000-foot view of this. So how do you replenish or rehabilitate the mitochondrial membranes? There's a researcher named Dr. Garth Nicholson, PhD, and he created a product called NT Factor Energy. And it's a blend of mitochondrial substrates along with healthy lipids like phosphatidylcholine to help reconstitute an optimal composition of the mitochondria. And when you do that, they're going to work better. And so this NT Factor Energy, I put in the one that I happen to like, but there are many companies that offer it. The Research Nutritionals brand is one I can speak to. Dr. Debbie Hamilton is a medical doctor and the medical director of Research Nutritionals. And I think they do really great work there. So I like to support them. I don't make any money off their products or anything, but it's something that you take usually 3 tablets 3 times a day with each meal for 2 to 3 months. And then you can go on a maintenance dose of 1 twice a day or at a minimum once a day to sort of keep your mitochondrial membranes healthy. And this is the primary way that I know of to rehabilitate the mitochondrial membranes. Also, it's worth mentioning here to try your best to avoid seed oils, peanut oil, soybean oil, canola oil, things like that create oxidized lipids, and they will be counterproductive to having a healthy mitochondrial membrane. So here's the mitochondrial. This is a very simplified diagram, but you can see the inner membrane here, outer membrane, and then these folds they refer to as cristae here. And so, this is an organelle that's floating around in the cytoplasm or fluid inside the cell, and then the nucleus would be sort of up here in the center. So the third aspect is substrate levels or optimal substrate levels. We talked about protection, we talked about membrane rehabilitation, and now we're going to talk about substrate levels. So coenzyme Q10 is a fat-soluble nutrient that people are frequently deficient in. And the most active form of coenzyme Q10 is called ubiquinol. So that's, if you're going to spend the money on it, you want to try and get the most active form. And in general, the studies reference 200 milligrams per day for it to be clinically effective and to really improve your energy levels overall and overall detoxification, cardiovascular symptoms. L-carnitine. So you've probably heard of L-carnitine for burning fat. And the reason it helps you burn body fat is because it carries fatty acids from the cytoplasm of the cell into the mitochondria to be burned for energy. And we refer to that process as beta oxidation. So fats have the highest amount of energy of any of the macronutrients. They release 9 kilocalories. And so when we burn them, you're going to obviously have a lot more energy. L-carnitine is kind of like a molecular Uber, picks up the fatty acids and drives them into the mitochondria so we can break them down for energy. And also vitamin B5 or pantothenic acid. It helps with a multitude of issues, but it's especially needed for the synthesis of fatty acids. And so in general, I recommend to people a B complex that has, B1 through B12. And B5 just happens to be one that's a little more important, I would say, than the others for mitochondrial function. So the coenzyme Q10, just make sure you're taking that with food if you want to supplement with that. And if you're on a statin drug, talk with your prescriber, but you're definitely going to want to take coenzyme Q10 because statins deplete coenzyme Q10. So how do we stimulate the production of new mitochondria? In general, in the past, we thought that only aerobic exercise really did the trick in terms of producing or triggering the body to produce new mitochondria. But now we know that high intensity interval training, whether that's compound exercises done with very little rest, or something called molecular hydrogen. So I've been using molecular hydrogen since 2017 in various forms. I actually have a machine in the other room that produces the water that I can drink, but it also has a nasal cannula so that I can breathe the hydrogen gas in. And what makes molecular hydrogen so important is that it's a really tiny molecule. And that's important because it has the ability to get inside of the mitochondria. And so not only does it stimulate what we call mitochondrial biogenesis, or the production of new mitochondria, it also helps repair the mitochondria we have. And so for people who got COVID, this was something that I would recommend often. It's not gonna, directly treat the COVID, but what it does is it helps to mitigate oxidative stress and what we call a cytokine storm. And so cytokines are little signaling molecules that some of our immune cells release, and they can make you feel really, really horrible. And that's one of the ways in which the coronavirus made you feel horrible. So molecular hydrogen, if you look at most of the research, I would say the majority of it's been performed in Asia because they're just sort of more open to it, to finding out, the root cause and what works versus, just saying, okay, you have high cholesterol, you have a statin deficiency, you have depression, you have a Prozac deficiency, that sort of thing. But there's tons of research behind it. And it's helped a lot of people with everything from glaucoma to performance enhancement in terms of athletes, and also calming down neuroinflammation. So if I feel a little inflamed neurologically, I'll put the nasal cannula on while I'm working. That way, I'm still getting my work done, but I'm also breathing gas, and my body's getting the antioxidants, and I'm protecting my mitochondria and healing the mitochondria. All right, so this is basically what I just said, but it's a special compound for a lot of reasons, one of which is that it's really small and it can get to where it needs to go. So you can have, a molecule or nutrient that's beneficial, and we know it's beneficial, but if it's too big to get to where it needs to go, it's not going to provide any benefit or marginal benefit at best. And like I said, it also helps repair damaged mitochondria. So it's working on several different mechanisms in the human body. So overall, what are other ways to enhance your mitochondria? And again, why do you want to enhance your mitochondria? So you can be better everywhere from the boardroom to the bedroom. You can have better hormone levels. You can be a better detoxifier. You can get better sleep, junk sleep. You can age gracefully and remain strong. So red light therapy. One of the ways in which red light therapy is beneficial is that it stimulates the mitochondria to produce more energy. Excuse me. And when it does that, it's generally working on a molecule called cytochrome C oxidase. And so if you come across that, if you're a science geek like myself, you'll read that phrase quite a bit. And cytochrome C oxidase is part of a process called the electron transport chain, specifically complex 4. And that's not really practical information, but I know a lot of you like the nitty-gritty details, so I thought I'd throw some in there. So red light therapy is beneficial for recovery from exercise, but I also have a colleague who treats orthopedic injuries, and he uses a number of techniques, but one primary technique is red light therapy. And it's working by stimulating the mitochondria in the skeletal muscles and in the soft tissues to heal at a faster rate. And if the mitochondria work better, everything's going to work better. So red light therapy, we know that it enhances recovery from exercise, but it was originally used in allopathic hospitals for wound care because it expedites the healing process. And, we've kind of gotten away from that. People think that red light therapy is new, but it's really just sort of revisiting something that we've known about, and now we just know it has much broader applications. Something else that is both a supplement or can be used in IV form is called methylene blue. Now, I'll warn you, if you just go to Google and type in methylene blue, stuff about cleaning aquariums is going to come up. And this is where the dose makes the poison. And so when I was at my friend's clinic a few weeks ago, I got an IV of methylene blue, and it was the most lucid and clairvoyant, sort of, if I can use that word, I've ever felt. And so it's used to treat a lot of conditions. Again, the dose is what's important. It can be taken orally or sublingually. It will stain your tongue, or it can be used as a troche, but it basically acts like oxygen in the body, and it helps your body utilize oxygen in the body. So it's going to have anti-aging properties. Now, a note of caution here is if you're on an SSRI, you should not take methylene blue. And the reason for that is methylene blue can lead to something called serotonin syndrome if it's administered when someone is on an SSRI or antidepressant. So the methylene blue, very beneficial for expediting healing. Again, it's going to probably be noticed in the brain first, since we have very active mitochondria in the brain, consuming a lot of oxygen. In lower doses, it's an electron acceptor. In higher doses, it's an electron donor. So mitochondrial enhancement, environmental inputs. So these are things that I like because, well, majority, all but one, are free. And just to briefly touch on these, one is hot-cold contrast showers. So when you're in the shower, have it on your normal temperature, turn the temperature up a little bit. And then the last 30 seconds, I have people start with 30 seconds of their shower, turn it on as cold as you can tolerate. Okay. And you can think of it as a very diluted version of a cold plunge or cryotherapy. And so those modalities work by stimulating the mitochondria, and the hot cold contrast showers helps to benefit the mitochondria as well. Infrared saunas. So infrared saunas, they have countless mechanisms through which they work on the human body. They increase something called heat shock proteins. They're involved with the genetic expression of something called FOXO3, and that has been associated in the literature with increased lifespan and health span. So the infrared saunas are also going to help with overall detoxification. And some of the environmental toxins, mercury, mold and mycotoxins, heavy metals, they're all going to basically beat up on the mitochondria. And so the more we can detoxify, and I don't mean these harsh, 3-day juice cleanses. I mean something that's sustainable, because we're never going to stop being exposed to toxins. It would be great if we were, but it's just not in the cards. And so we have to do something that's sustainable and practical, and it's not so harsh on the impacts on the body. So if you've never done an infrared sauna, you definitely want to start low with, say just 5 minutes at maybe 105, 110 degrees, and gradually build from there. One thing we know about infrared sauna usage now, based on the research, is that frequency is more important than duration. So if you could use an infrared sauna, even 15 to 20 minutes, 5 times a week, that's much, much better than an hour and a half once or twice a week. And I know it's not convenient because you have extra clothes, you've got to shower afterwards, you don't want to reabsorb those toxins, etc. But now I have a full spectrum sauna upstairs, and it's a portable one from Therasage. I think their products are great. It used to be if you wanted a high quality infrared sauna, you had to spend around $8 grand. I spent around $1,200, and mine has near, mid, and far infrared wavelengths. and it works great. So I'm a big proponent of Therasage. The power output is great. The non-native EMF, electromagnetic fields, are very low. So that's something to consider. It's a great investment. It can be used by everyone in your family. Air filtration system. So behind me, it's pretty quiet, so you probably can't hear it, but I have an air doctor running. So the air doctor system is an ultra HEPA plus carbon filter. And it filters down to, I think it's 0.09 microns. So it catches things like viruses, mycotoxins, and it has a little circle in the front that will tell you sort of the current status of indoor air quality. And it will ramp up or down based on that reading. And so there are many, many high-end filtration systems out there, but I like this one because it's, much less cost prohibitive. I think I paid $500 for mine. And I'll probably be getting another one for the upstairs soon, but it's much cheaper than some of the others that can be as much as $4,000 or $5,000. And so, indoor air, think about how many times we breathe per minute, 12 to 16 times per minute, multiply that by 60, multiply that by 24, you start to realize how incredibly important air quality is. Now, morning and evening sunlight. So my buddy that Dr. Downs mentioned in my bio, Dr. Jack Cruz, he's both a neurosurgeon and a dentist. And one thing that he, harps on over and over and over again, and rightfully so, is getting morning and evening sunlight. This helps to entrain or regulate your circadian rhythm. So everything in the body works on an ebb and a flow. So it's sort of a cyclical nature. When we get artificial blue light that I'm sitting under right now, that's not healthy for the mitochondria. The blue light from the sun is healthy for the mitochondria. Now, a note of caution. I know people are going to ask, well, what about sunburn? What about skin cancer? So getting morning sun and evening sun is going to expose you to a smaller quantity of harmful rays. It's during the middle of the day, middle of the afternoon, that you're going to get more harmful rays. And so it's preferable, actually, it's pretty much required that you get, unless you have melanoma, you get morning and evening sun without any sort of sunscreen on. And even when you do use sunscreen, you want to use a mineral-based sunscreen. There are several organic lines out there. You probably want to check them through something called the Environmental Working Group. So that is a free educational site. It's ewg.org. So ewg.org. You can put in the product name and it'll come up with, what type of harmful chemicals it has, what they do, what the research says. It's very thorough. But this morning and evening sunlight helps to regulate your circadian rhythm, helps you get better quality sleep at night, helps you feel more awake during the day, because when the sunlight hits the retina and the mitochondria in the retina, remember that has the highest number of mitochondria, it helps to boost dopamine. Dopamine is one of those neurochemicals, brain chemicals, that helps with motivation, drive, focus, reward, and memory. So if you want a little extra motivation, want more energy, get morning sunlight on as much surface area of your body as possible. And remember, even when you can't see the sun, it's still shining through the clouds if you read the work of Dr. Andrew Huberman at Stanford. So you may have to spend more time outside to get the same dosage, or what we call fluency, of sunlight, but it's still there. Now, if you live in a colder environment, you can definitely get something like a sun lamp. There's no replacement for the sun, okay? But you can mimic 10 to 15% of it through different types of sun lamps. There's one called Sperti, SPERTI, and that can really help with mood for people that have seasonal affective disorder. and tend to notice lower mood during the winter months. So we talked about hot, cold contrast showers, infrared saunas, air filtration systems, morning and evening sunlight. And guess what? While you're outside getting your morning and evening sun, I want you to use bug spray on your feet and ankles, but I want you to walk barefoot in the grass. Okay. Now, you're probably saying, well, this Dr. Tim guy, he's gone off the deep end. This is total quackery. But actually, it's not. It's something called the Schumann resonance. So the Earth has its natural hertz. I think it's 7.8 something hertz frequency. And that helps to add electrons to the body. And basically, if you've ever been outside after a rainstorm, you have probably felt a little bit euphoric or an improved mood and cognition. And that is from the addition of electrons and ions in the air. So walking just 10 to 15 minutes on barefoot on the ground will help to add electrons to the body. And when you do that, it's anti-inflammatory. This is anti-inflammatory, and it's going to help improve your energy. So supplementation. Some of these we covered already. Some of these we haven't, but molecular hydrogen, if you've never tried it and you don't want to buy a machine until you know that it's going to help, there are tablets that you can get from a myriad of companies out there that you dissolve in water and you keep the top on because you don't want the concentration to decrease or diffuse. And you drink the water on an empty stomach. And you can try that out for anti-inflammatory purposes, improved recovery from workouts, if you're healing from a surgery or medical procedure, or addressing any sort of health imbalance, it can be beneficial. And if you try it and it works, then you can look into a machine. The machine I have, I paid a little less than $2,500 for it, and it was worth every penny and then some. I can breathe the gas, I can drink the water, and it's a very potent anti-inflammatory. So that's going to also boost the mitochondria in terms of helping with repair and regeneration, but also it's going to stimulate the production of new mitochondria as well. And that's one of the things that makes it so powerful. It's working on so many different levels, in addition to being very potent anti-inflammatory. NAD+, so we talked about this earlier, can be taken orally, by injection, or used transdermally. And so this is something that if you haven't tried, you can try the sublingual lozenges or the troches. You could go in for an infusion. That's obviously a little more pricey. Or if you have a functional medicine provider with prescribing privileges, they can write for some subcutaneous, just under the skin injections. And that helps with sort of creating a calm energy. And all of these things are going to create a calm energy. It's not going to be like coffee where it sort of whacks you over the head. It's going to be more subtle, but also sustainable and healthier. PQQ is a supplement that adds electrons to the body and has also been shown to stimulate the production of new mitochondria or mitochondrial biogenesis. Okay. And so that is another supplement that can be very beneficial for overall health and healing, especially if you're dealing with any sort of diagnoses or imbalance. Coenzyme Q10, again, this is one that our bodies makes, but we're often deficient in. And it's something that will help with cognition, cardiovascular health, and just overall preventing those peaks and valleys of energy throughout the day, especially in the early to mid-afternoon. And then methylene blue. So that's one where they have troches, as well as the IV infusion. And I think they also have the subcutaneous shots. So another connection, and again, this is one that's free, but we know mindset's very important. And what we think is very important. That affects our physiology. For every thought we have, there's a physiological consequence, right? And so when you are experiencing psychosocial stress or emotional distress, within about 3-4 minutes tops, mitochondria gradually start ramping down their energy production. And that's because they sense or detect a threat. And so you can do all the other things and they will be helpful. But if you don't work on mitigating stress and working on a positive, healthy mindset, you won't receive the optimal benefits from the supplements and other therapeutic modalities. So another reason why we need to mitigate stress. So let's sort of summarize and let me tell you what I told you. So everything we do, from sleeping, exercising, thinking, requires energy. And that energy is produced in our mitochondria. So no matter what your health goals are or your life goals are, improving your mitochondrial health will help all of it. Okay, and it'll help you get there faster. And it'll also help ward off disease. It allows you to be more productive in every area of your life. It helps determine how you show up in your relationships. It helps you be present for your kids or grandkids, or mom and dad and siblings. And it's also associated, mitochondrial dysfunction is associated with nearly every chronic disease known to man. And so what are you going to do today or tomorrow and the next day to improve your mitochondria? Hopefully, some of the things we go back, the hot cold contrast showers, the infrared saunas, the morning and evening sunlight, the grounding and earthing, all free, but very, very powerful, especially when you start stacking. So, in order so you don't get overwhelmed, I recommend adding one at a time. And then when you're sort of used or adapted to that, and you've noticed the benefits, start layering in a second one. And then, they're synergistic. So the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And so these are all things to help improve your quality of life, extend your lifespan, make you smarter, stronger, faster. Any questions or comments? My website is on here. I also have a podcast I started back last August. We're on episode 36, I think. It's called the Boss Body Podcast. And I interview thought leaders in functional medicine and wellness from all over the world. Everyone from medical doctors to health coaches, because we all have an important role to play. And there's certainly no lack of sick people, especially in the United States. So it's important that we all work together. I'm very thankful for this opportunity to present to you guys. I really hope this information was useful. Feel free, if you have questions, to reach out. And I'm also going to check the chat right now. Okay, someone said, just trying the transcriptions troches. One I've been using is liquid by Compass Labs. I
Would
like
you
that one.
switch to just showing you rather than the slides right now, because you're much more interesting than a slide? That's perfect.
All right. Let me see if I can get okay. So transcriptions, yes, I have not tried that brand, but I have several colleagues who use them and recommend them. Dr. Ted is an extremely brilliant doctor and individual. They have, if I'm not mistaken, methylene blue as well. And I think NAD also. Is there a test to evaluate mitochondrial health? There are a few tests. Well, there's a few different avenues to approach it from. So you can look at something like an organic acids test that will show you B vitamin levels, as well as mitochondrial metabolites like pyruvate and lactate. There's also, and this is in some of the European labs, you can look at the health of the mitochondrial membrane, the levels of superoxide dismutase. And so that's a good question in terms of evaluating mitochondrial health. It's not readily available. There you can look at things like mitochondrial antibodies, making sure you don't have those. You can look at coenzyme Q10 levels, because all of those things are going to negatively impact mitochondrial health. Carbon fiber is used in the pad. Don't know. Yeah, so microplastics, they certainly can have a negative impact. I mean, on a lot of your physiology, especially your hormones, but also your mitochondria. And so, the last stat that I read was the average American inhales a debit card's worth of microplastics per week. And so just living on this planet for 1 month is enough to disrupt your entire endocrine system. And so it's not good. I have this plastic bottle right here, but normally I'm drinking out of a BPA free and microplastic free metal protein shaker bottle at / water bottle. But microplastics are, extremely difficult on your physiology. Sauna can help with them. Mobilizing the lymphatic system can help with them. Using a vibration plate to achieve things like that. Those can all be beneficial. See, someone else said, I get pharmaceutical grade methylene blue on Amazon. Yeah, IV methylene blue, just to give you guys a heads up. I mean, I've been doing IVs since 2006. And with the methylene blue, you're increasing energy production, right? And when you increase energy production, remember how I said when energy production goes down, your detoxification reactions slow down. Some of them come to a halt. So when you jumpstart them again, you can sort of have a detoxification reaction. So if you're going to do something like IV methylene blue, it may be beneficial to supplement with a binder, like an activated charcoal or a carbon-based binder on an empty stomach about 30 to 40 minutes prior to receiving the IV. That's just sort of my personal philosophy. You may be totally fine. Let's see. Yeah, so someone asked, how about a heat sauna? So yeah, so all of these stressors like hot, cold contrast are what we call hormetic stressors, meaning it basically trains your body to adapt and become more resilient. So you sort of press the stress button and then you back off. And a heat sauna does that. So back to my cell and molecular biology days, there's 2 ways to change the function of a protein. Change the temperature, change the pH. And so when we change the temperature, that's going to improve and enhance the rate at which all your biochemical reactions take place. And so when we talk about the benefits of saunas, whether it's just a plain heat sauna or infrared, the heat, it's going to increase your core body temperature and your basal metabolic rate to an extent, and that's going to be very beneficial. So if you remember, I don't know any movie off the top of my head, but you see a lot of people who might be overweight or even obese, in Italy or Greece, but they're doing a sauna, 4 or 5 times a week. And it has life extending qualities for that gene, FOXO3 expression that I mentioned earlier. I use a powerful near infrared and far infrared light, but it's still good enough if I just place my bare feet on it for 20 minutes per day. So you're putting your feet on the near infrared and far infrared may provide some benefit, but in general, you want to cover as much surface area of your body as possible. And so, I have a Rejuvenators because I bought mine back in 2017. But basically, like some NFL teams, they'll have a recovery room where they have a red light device on all 4 walls. And every 1.5 to 2 minutes, you rotate. So you want to cover as much surface area as possible. Now, I have this guy right here. It's a transcranial photobiomodulation device. And so I'll just turn it on. So there's the red. You can see the red. If I hit it again, that's 10 hertz pulsed alpha. And so this is something you wear on your forehead. I do it almost every morning. And it shines light onto the prefrontal cortex. So that's more specifically targeting the mitochondria of the brain. If we want just sort of general systemic anti-inflammatory and recovery from exercise benefits, we want to hit as much surface area as possible. And so if you can hang your device, your red light box, even if it's a small one, you'll have to spend more time, but the large ones obviously cost more. It's not going to hurt you to put your feet on it. And that stimulates the kidney meridians as well, just like ionic foot baths. So it's not the actual foot baths that's going to contain the toxins. It's going to trigger the kidney meridian to detoxify toxins through the urine, or concentrate the toxins through the urine. Yes, we can certainly have a party at my house. I have way too much equipment, and my family thinks I'm crazy, but that's okay. They probably thought that most of my life. So I figured it's better to be healthy and crazy than unhealthy and crazy. So I'm just going to go with it. Are there quality differences between aquarium quality and farmer grade? What is the dosage? So I have never taken the aquarium grade stuff, so I can't really comment on that. And usually it's going to come in doses that would be toxic to humans. Okay. Now IV, so I don't know the max dose orally. IV, we generally don't go above around 40 milligrams. Okay. I mean, there might be some people doing it, but it's generally not safe. And so the troches, like someone mentioned, transcriptions, they have a healthy dosage in it. And you want to go by, what's called the minimal effective dose, or MED. So, and I'm just making these numbers up, but let's say 100 milligrams of this nutrient helps me achieve my goals. Then there's absolutely no reason to go to 200 milligrams or even 150 milligrams. So listen to your body. Definitely don't use the aquarium stuff for internal consumption, and start with just minuscule amounts. There are liquid drops that will turn your tongue blue, but you can hold sublingually under the tongue, and that can benefit as well. Do you recommend the nasal red light therapy? So that's a company called V-Light. That's Dr. Michael Hamblin out of Harvard. It's probably working through some indirect mechanisms. I have one that a neurosurgeon buddy of mine gave me, and it's the 810 nanometer wavelength, which can also target pathogens. So it may be that it's doing that, but also red light therapy, no matter where it's used, increases nitric oxide production. So increased blood flow and perfusion. So if you do that in the nose, you're going to get better perfusion to the brain. When my V-Light device did work, I did notice improved, cognition and sort of mental prowess when I used it. Great question. So is red light 660 nanometers specifically? So this device right here, there's two types of this unit called the Titan R. And full disclosure, I am the VP of medical strategy for this company, but I love the product, and it does wonders. And the app's coming out, and you'll be able to choose certain wavelengths, depending on your individual needs. But the Pro unit version of this goes from roughly 800 nanometers to 1100 nanometers. And so the higher the wavelength, the deeper the penetration. So 660 nanometers has benefits, but in general, you want the broader the spectra of wavelengths, the more benefits you're going to get. Is D-ribose an ingredient of metformin or another diabetic medication or supplement? This says D-ribose. I'm assuming they meant D-ribose. The D-ribose is a sugar that can be used for energy enhancement. Some people say not to use it if you have candida overgrowth or sort of a yeast overgrowth, but it's not part of metformin. Metformin works by improving insulin sensitivity and glucose disposal. And I'm not a big fan of metformin in terms of longevity, and I'll tell you why. It helps, or not helps, but it turns down a series of reactions in your body called methylation reactions. And those reactions are crucial for producing some of our white blood cells, some of our neurotransmitters, and detoxifying a lot of different environmental compounds and chemicals. So I'm a big fan of improving insulin sensitivity, but things like resistance training, chromium, alpha lipoic acid are better options, berberine, in my opinion, than metformin. Oh, okay. So someone asked if I can recommend somewhere that that offers the machine. So I can, and I'm happy to get a discount code and send it to Dr. Susan if you guys are interested. But the name of the machine that I used is called Aqua Cure, AQUACURE. And the gentleman's name, he's a physicist out of Canada. His name is George Wiseman. And I can probably negotiate a discount for the group based on my interaction and professional relationship with him. I like this machine for a number of reasons. One, it's several $1,000s cheaper than the others. Number two, it's technically not just a molecular hydrogen machine. It's creating something called Brown's gas. Brown's gas is a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen. So it makes the water, which you can drink on an empty stomach. A lot of times I'll do that before I exercise and during my workout. Or you can breathe it in through a nasal cannula, breathe in the gas. And that's going to have, more benefits on your central nervous system. And it even comes with a bubbler that you can use. So you can run a bathtub full of water, put the bubbler in there. And George has an employee who was in a motorcycle accident. And, the surgeon told him that it was going to be 7 to 8 month recovery period. Well, I don't remember the exact number of months it took him, but it was essentially half or less than half because he used the molecular hydrogen machine every day. And George Wiseman himself wore glasses, I think, from the age of 8 or 9 to 60 something. And then he started using goggles with a tube that connects the molecular hydrogen gas. And he did that for an hour a day for 6 months. And he no longer needs glasses. So I have only good things to say about the machine. When you think about the price of the tablets, which, by the way, the tablets, you have to dissolve in water and you have to keep the top on and drink it very quickly. Otherwise, the concentration diffuses and you lose some of the potency. And so that machine, I can definitely work on getting a discount for the group. Hopefully that answers you guys' questions. Okay, someone asked MCT oil and ubiquinol. Yes. So MCT, medium chain triglycerides, derived from coconut oil. Ubiquinol oil is a form, the most bioavailable and bioactive form, coenzyme Q10. So they are different. The MCT oil can be beneficial for helping you burn body fats, and it can also help the mitochondria to an extent, but different mechanism than coenzyme Q10. Anyone else got other questions?
Yeah, there are more questions in the chat, but I'd like to ask, what about some of these mitochondrial supplements like LifeWave, which is a mitochondrial patch, or MitoPure? What do you think of these?
Yeah, so I've heard great things about the LifeWave patches. I have not worn them personally, but I know several colleagues who use them. And so, I've ran across too many case studies for it to be placebo. Let's just say that. And so I have no involvement or connection to the company, and I've not used it personally, but I've gotten great feedback from patients and colleagues. The MitoPure is a unique compound referred to as urolithin A. It's found in things like pomegranates, but it's largely dependent on the composition of our microbiome to turn it into that bioactive form. And who doesn't have disrupted gut flora in today's world? I've been working on gut health since 2005, and I still have disrupted gut flora. I mean, it's much, much better. I mean, exponentially better. But the point being, everyone has a compromised microbiome in today's world. And so the urolithin A, or the MitoPure, is really good. Again, I think the more ways you can approach mitochondrial health from different avenues, whether it's, the grounding, the morning and evening sunlight, the MitoPure, molecular hydrogen, the better the outcome's going to be.
If anybody wants the MitoPure, you can email me and I could get you some. Maybe at a discount. I'm not sure how it works.
Someone asked if I see my direct chat questions. I just see general chat. Oh, wait a second.
There are more questions, such as, do statins affect mitochondria? Well, since they knock out CoQ10, they directly affect the transport chain. But how about you addressing that?
Yeah, so statins, a lot of the integrative cardiologists I know, well, first of all, there's not a lot of them, but there's a handful of them. But most of them will tell you that they like statins for secondary prevention. So if someone's already had a heart attack, then using that along with coenzyme Q10 to prevent a second heart attack. Some of that, in my opinion, is to cover your butt from a medical legal standpoint, because if someone has a heart attack and you get audited or the board gets word of that, you're going to be in big trouble, not because you did anything wrong, but just because they disagree with it. And so we know that 30% of your cell membranes consist of cholesterol. So cholesterol, even LDL by itself, is not bad until it becomes oxidized. And where does that oxidize or free radical damage come from? Stealth pathogens, chronic infections, that's a common source. Heavy metals, pesticides, mycotoxins, emotional stress. And so if you're going to take a statin, and by the way, most of the papers suggest that there are secondary mechanisms to the statin that are anti-inflammatory in nature. And if they have any benefit, it's that. It's not directly lowering the cholesterol. If you read the work of Dr. Daniel Amen, the psychiatrist who's written all the books, he used to work in the prison system. And he said that the prisoners with the most violent outbursts had the lowest cholesterol levels. And so what's a low cholesterol level? Well, I define it, and most people do, anything below 160 for total cholesterol. And, there could be a number of reasons. There are certain genetic polymorphisms, certain gut issues that can lead to low cholesterol. But there are things we can do to help, bring it up, because mine was low at one point in my life. I took a supplement to help raise it. And it was like, oh, someone turned the light switch on to my brain. So, that tells you right there. We know that there's an association in the research between statin drugs and Alzheimer's. Now, you're not going to hear that on TV, but that's what the research says. So let's see here.
There's another one about D-ribose, and that's the backbone of the ATP. Does taking D-ribose help produce ATP? Does it help perform so you can perform better athletically or cognitively?
Let's see, I'm trying to see. Okay, so, well, let me answer this question real quick. So what brand is the red light for the brain? It's called Titan, TITAN-IR. And the name of the company is Medify, MEDIFY. And so the website is Medify, PBM, stands for photobiomodulation. So medifypbm.com. Now, the question about D-ribose. So for some reason, I'm not seeing it, but you said they asked, will it directly increase ATP production?
Yes, or affect athletic or cognitive abilities.
It should. So it depends on what else causing your mitochondrial dysfunction. And usually it's not just one thing. It's, a number of variables. But it's relatively inexpensive, the D-ribose. The key is to take it on an empty stomach. And the dosing, I haven't taken it in years, but usually you want to do 5 grams at least twice a day on an empty stomach. And not too close to bed, because even though it's not a stimulant, it can be stimulating. I hope that answered your question.
There's a question about an infrared blanket, because space is a problem. That's a problem I have.
Yeah, there's a blanket. There's a company called Higher Dose. It's 2 girls who are former models who, found that, working on their physiology and their health, they didn't have to go on these extreme diets. And I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but the blanket they made is an infrared blanket. And they have an infrared mat that also offers PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. So that's something to consider. I also have on my couch something called a biomat, BIOMAT. And it's an infrared mat that has amethyst crystals. So it adds ions to the body. So that's going to be anti-inflammatory. And it's also going to increase what we call microcirculation in the small blood vessels. So when we start getting, stiffness in arteries and plaque in the arteries, it happens in the small blood vessels before it happens in the large blood vessels. So a lot of times people don't heal because they're not getting optimal perfusion. So anything like a biomat or an infrared mat is going to provide tremendous health benefits. And the handbook, I think it's made in Japan, but they don't cite any studies, but they say even 1/10 of a degree drop in your body temperature downregulates immune function. And I think going from 98.6 to 98.1 can decrease your natural killer cells, some very important immune cells, by as much as 36%. So having optimal body temperature, at the end of the day, I tell people I'm concerned with 2 things, just 2: your body temperature and your libido. Why am I concerned with those 2 things? Because your body temperature, number one, I know that your mitochondria are working well and your metabolism is working well, and your libido. Nature only wants to produce things that are stronger, happier, and more beautiful. And so I might hit a nerve with this, but there's a reason we're having so many reproductive issues in this country. You look at the health of mom and dad, and you'll find the answer. And so I have to tread carefully when I say stuff like that, but people need to know this information.
There's also a question in the chat about grounding.
Okay, let's see.
And also someone else asked about a grounding pillowcase.
Grounding pillowcase. I'm not familiar with the grounding pillowcase. I'll tell you what I do have underneath my mattress in my bed, and this is a recommendation from Dr. Jack Cruz. It's called a Magnetico. I think it's MAGNETICO. And the one I have is 10 Gauss. So the Gauss refers to the strength, but it's meant to recreate that Schumann resonance, as if we're sleeping on the ground outside. So, we're walking around all day inside, and especially if you're in a major city, on the 12th floor, and you're surrounded by all this Wi-Fi and you're not getting electrons and human residents, you're going to be very, very inflamed. So the Magnetico, helps me detoxify while I sleep. I noticed feeling a little more well rested. After I started using it, I've been using it about 10 years now. It's a little pricey. I think the 10 gauss was about 1,300. It's not something you have to do. I mean, if you're not doing any grounding, I would start with just walking barefoot outside with bug spray on for 10 to 15 minutes in the morning and 10 to 15 minutes in the afternoon. Let's see.
There's some more questions about deuterium depleted water.
Yeah, so deuterium depleted water. I know a fair amount about it. I have not gotten around to using it because I've been busy with all the other toys and gadgets and projects. But deuterium depletion is very important for mitochondrial health and optimal mitochondrial functioning. So a lot of people will try to improve their mitochondria by just taking massive doses of CoQ10 and L-carnitine. But if you have a lot of environmental toxins, you have a lot of deuterium, mold, mycotoxins, heavy metals, stealth pathogens, those are going to negatively affect the ability of the mitochondria to work. So we not only have to put the good stuff in, we have to work on getting the bad stuff out.
Some other questions about the use of AKA, that's alpha ketoglutarate acid, and its effects on the mitochondria.
Yeah, so alpha ketoglutarate or alpha ketogluteric acid can be beneficial. It can help with the clearance of ammonia. And that's one of the roles that's on the slide where it had all the roles of mitochondria in the human body and physiology and biochemistry. So it can certainly be beneficial. It's not my first go-to. I don't think I have any colleagues who are huge proponents of it, but that's not to say it's not totally legitimate. It's just not, there's so much information and knowledge out there now. It's all I can do to keep up and stay on top of it. And that's just one I haven't gotten around to using more. I used it about 10 years ago, and then I kind of got away from it. Let's see, someone asked, would you please talk a bit more about berberine for blood sugar balance? So berberine is great for blood sugar balancing, but a lot of the supplements, well, berberine in particular, you don't want to go above 1 gram, which is 1,000 milligrams, because it can have negative impacts on the microbiome. And so it's best to balance blood glucose through using a few different mechanisms. One, chromium picolinate, 200 micrograms a day. Number two, you can do berberine, 500 milligrams twice a day with food. You could use, if you could test it and are sure you don't have high mercury levels, you could use the R alpha lipoic acid or the sodium R-alpha lipoic acid. It can cause movement of metals throughout the body, especially mercury. So if you have high levels, you would want to hold off on using that for a while. It doesn't make alpha lipoic acid bad. It just means you have to be careful with the timing. Probably the most important thing you can do for balancing blood sugar is moving your body, more specifically resistance training. So I've been lifting weights since I was 18, freshman on the campus of Wake Forest University. I grew up in a small town. We didn't have gyms or a gym, and so didn't really have opportunity to work out. But I've been kind of a gym rat ever since then. I do it as much for my mental health as I do for my physical health. But resistance training upregulates something called the GLUT4 receptor. And they are extremely important in terms of glucose/sugar disposal. So think of muscle as a very high-end metabolic currency. And so, I thought that most people were away from this, but I still run into it from time to time. People are focusing on, I burned 300 calories while I was working out. It's not the amount of calories you burn while you worked out. It's something called EPOC, excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. So EPOC, excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. So doing things like resistance training and not just light weights, I get female clients from time to time and they say, oh, well, Dr. Chen, I don't want to get too bulky. And I said, that's kind of like saying, I don't want to get too smart, so I'm not going to read. In general, men have 10 times as much testosterone as women. So, I mean, us men, we have a hard enough time getting muscle. So unless you're just a genetic anomaly, you're not going to get too big. And the resistance training, it specifically is protected to the brain. It increases something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. And this is something that when you get a concussion or you have a stroke, levels of it decline. I call it miracle grow for your neurons. And so you can have certain polymorphisms in your genetics where you don't produce as much. And so exercise helps to ramp up that production. Okay, someone said it will help us if you slow down and spell the name of the red light headpiece. Okay, I think I spelled that. I will see if I can get a group promo code on that as well. I will work on that and I'll get back to Dr. Downs. So does the hydrogen water that you drink stay in hydrogen form when you are away from home, drinking from a water bottle that you filled up in your house in the morning? So you want to try and consume the water as soon as possible. So like if I want to make water, I have to turn it on a different setting than if I want to breathe the gas. And it takes about 10 minutes at this particular setting to make the water. You want to drink that water as close to the time that you made it as possible. And you want to drink it on an empty stomach. It's not going to hurt you to drink it or drink it on top of food, but you won't get as much benefit. And so the more time elapses, the greater the concentration is going to decline. Someone asked me if I see my direct chat questions. I don't know if I do. Direct message. I have no connection with mine up here. I can connect you.
No. That I was typed to everyone, and for some reason it went to you. I don't know why.
Oh, okay. Thank you guys for the comments and the kind words. It was a pleasure. You guys, I can tell, are very well educated on this stuff. You asked very intelligent questions. I can tell you're thinking it through, and you guys are very welcome. I'm happy to come back and present in more detail on the mitochondria in the future. I'm constantly learning. I tell people all the time because they'll say, I asked you about that in 2017 and your answer was different. Yeah, because I've learned exponential amount since then. And so I'm constantly learning. As cliche as it sounds, I know there's so much more that I have to learn. But this quote that I read a few months back, maybe back in the fall, is that if you read, the Wall Street Journal every day for a year, you're exposed to more information than our great-great-grandparents were in an entire lifetime. And so you need both a you need both a laser and a funnel. So a funnel helps you sift through all the BS, and then the laser helps you hone in and be more deliberate with what you're trying to do versus just throwing everything at the issue. You guys are very welcome. There's people are asking, can we re-listen to this presentation?
When I edit this and we place it on our website, you'll be able, you'll be able to listen to it. I'm just going to cut off the beginnings and ends because there's nothing else I'm really going to edit out. Sometimes if somebody says something that's political, If they wish, we can edit it out. But other than that, you know, I'll cut off the ends and we'll put it on our website. That's www.SVHI, as in Silicon Valley Health Institute. If you want to save the chat, there's 3 little dots on the bottom under meeting chat. You click those and then you just hit save chat. Sometimes there's some very important information in the chat. So our next meeting will be on June 13th at noon. I have to figure out what time zone that is. But it'll be on that on the 13th of June. And anybody has any questions, you can raise your hands or unmute yourself and just jump right in. Well, want to thank you so much. What are you drinking?
Structured water.
Oh, somebody had a
Okay.
question.
Yeah, so there's the main question. So thank you for the answer about drinking the hydrogen Brown's gas water in the morning on an empty stomach. But the reality is, after that, the whole rest of the day, I'm away from home and I've got to have a good water to drink from a water bottle. Right now, I put a crystal in my water and I'm buying Vortex water from a store that, you know, in my drinking, and I've got blue glass and it has a great word on it and all those good things. Put in the sun. What's the best way to drink the rest of the day's water, since I know I'm away from home and so many people they're at work, they're in their car, they can't keep drinking Brown's gas water. So what can we do?
Yeah, so I have, and again, you know, this would be something you would have to fill up at home, but it's not something you have to make or turn it on a particular setting. It's called an aqua energizer. A colleague introduced me to it about a year. No, I've had it for almost 2 years. So about 2 years ago, and it's a structured water filter. So it structures the water, kind of like the vortex that you mentioned. And that creates H3O2, which it sounds silly, but it's wetter water. So it's easier to stay hydrated with that. But there's different, you know, types depending on how much you want to spend. I have the one that's underneath my kitchen sink, and I think I paid like 700 and something, but you know, it's going to last at least 15, probably 20 years. And then I don't have to buy bottled water or distilled water or anything. So I like to fill up a big jug of water in the morning, mix some electrolytes in there, you know, as long as it's a blend of electrolytes with all of them in healthy ratios. Electrolytes are underrated. They're not sexy like hormones or even mitochondria per se, but they're extremely important, right, Dr. Downs? I mean, there's a reason we check electrolytes in patients. You know, they create electricity, right? So we're biophysical beings that we have, you know, really important biochemical reactions, but the biophysics of our environment drives the biochemistry. So to answer your question, structured water with some electrolytes added in.
Is that the brand name, Aqua Energizer?
Yeah, that's the name of the filter. So it not only structures the water, it's a filter. Now, it doesn't filter everything, like especially fluoride, which, you know, it's hard to filter, but it does filter most of the stuff out there.
And do you have a particular product name for the blend of electrolytes you like to add to it?
So the one I get is actually just from Earth Fare, which is a local, it's a southeastern organic grocery store. But it's called Ultima. I think they have it at Whole Foods and Amazon and pretty much everywhere. And it's a powder. It's a good tasting powder with no sugar. Just mix it in water. And it's going to help, you know, toxins get out of your cell, nutrients get into your cell.
You mentioned going to Idaho also for IV. I'm not sure where you live, but what's the best way to find out where a good place for getting an IV is if you want to just try it? Can you just walk into some place? For example, the place in Idaho, whatever that was.
So there's some places now, like we even have them here. I think it's a national chain called IV Hydration. There's another one called Fuel something. And I don't know the process because I haven't been in there, but it's like an a la carte menu. But I assume there has to be some sort of, entrance exam in terms of physical examination or blood chemistry, depending on what you want to get done. Like if it's a Myers cocktail, which is a multivitamin in a bag going straight into your bloodstream, then you're probably not going to have any issue getting that. If it's something like ozone or EBU, which is extracorporeal blood ozonation and oxygenation, you're going to need to do some blood work first.
Thank you. Oh, one last
Sure.
question. Do you have any perspective on things like the Alima water wands, the wands that you could put in water if you didn't have your aqua energizer and you just had your bottle of water, the different water wands?
Someone added me to a Facebook group of, I think back in November, December, and I don't know if it's a wand specifically for water. I know that it has like a very specific frequency, and people are reporting lots of great testimonials, or reporting lots of testimonials for healing from different, ailments. I don't know if you can use that one, in the water itself. So that's something I actually don't know enough to really comment on, at least not intelligently. Is that something you use?
I did get one, and Dr. Cohen, who used to be in the Bay Area, highly recommends a particular one, has many interviews with the founders of the Alima water wands.
What's it called?
Alima, I think. I don't know if I have the spelling right, but Dr. Tom Cohen has many podcasts on interviewing the maker of this.
So Dr. Downs, you have some wands there?
I've got two wands, if she can identify which one it is. I got the blue one in the South Bay, and the other one is supposed to be super hot. I had to send away for it.
Yes, the one you sent away for that's white might be Dr. Tom Cohen's brand, of which
I suspect it is.
Yeah, and then the blue one I actually bought because the non-blue one, the clear one, was a lot more expensive. I was about to get it, and for some reason I ended up with the blue one, which I've been using. I can't say again, personally, how effective is it? What's the difference between using a wand and an aqua energizer, for example? I imagine that one, you really get good structured water from an aqua energizer. And then other people will say, oh, like I'm doing lately, just put a crystal in your water bottle. That's good enough.
Well, Emoto would say just you can structure water just by writing the word love and placing it on it. And maybe through some kind of energetic testing, you can find what's best and most compatible with you, because the answer might be different for each person, or the water or something. So I don't know. We probably bought the blue one at the same place at the same time, I suspect.
Yeah,
Can you say where you got them?
The blue one I got at a potluck dinner. A guy was making a presentation. The one that's clear was I guess a summit on or a conference. There's a conference on EMF, and they had several high priced items, and I got it from there. I think it was associated with Dr. Cohen.
Yes. Yeah. So, I still kind of agree with our presenter here that it might be nice to just know that you've got structured water, you've got H3O2 from something under your sink. And then in addition to that, perhaps do the words, the positive words, the wands, the crystal in the bottle. But I think a device like that seems good to me.
Someone had a question about EMF blockers. So on my podcast, he's a friend and a client. I'm not violating HIPAA because he has a testimonial on my website. I have his permission to use his name, but Nick Penault, the EMF guy, I have a podcast interview that I did with him, and we cover, a lot of the EMF mitigating gadgets out there. He collaborates with the top EMF scientists in the world. And so I can send him a product or a link to a product, and he'll tell me, yes, it's legitimate. No, it's not legitimate. Like, for example, I don't remember the name of it because I got it in 2014. but it was a phone case that's supposed to block EMFs. But Nick was explaining to me that you don't want to do that because the cell phone will actually ramp up EMF production so that it can, have the output and the connection with the tower. So don't quote me on this, but I think there's a website he recommended, shieldedhealing.com, that basically you add a different wavelength to the incoming wavelengths, and it makes it less harmful. So you're not blocking per se. The one thing I know that does help with blocking, and that's the Lambs clothing line, LAMBS. I have some of their t-shirts, some of their boxers. I think they might have sports bras for women. Yeah.
No
There you
sports
go.
bras. They've got panties,
No-
shirts, hats, something put around the neck, and they just came out with a hoodie.
Okay. Yeah, and that's made out of the same material that NASA astronauts use. And so that is something that's legitimate. And then the other thing is, it sounds so simple, but unplugging your router at night. And you'd be surprised at the pushback I get from people on this. And so I asked them, well, okay, am I interrupting your work? Are you working while you're sleeping? Instead of sleepwalking, you're sleepworking? Oh, well, no, Dr. Tim, it's not that. Okay, well, what is it? And then they can't give me any reason. So I'm like, okay, so let's just unplug it. I mean, so the question, if someone challenges you on EMFs, I tell them, if I'm right, then, and we go with my way of seeing the world, you become more present and more centered. If they're wrong and EMFs are harmful and we didn't do anything, then we're in trouble. And so worst case scenario, you become more present, have less overall exposures. More importantly, EMFs cause the production of a molecule called peroxynitrite. And that molecule can make you feel pretty lousy and cause a lot of damage in the body.
Yeah.
I have one more question. Do you have any experience with the scalar rooms, the EE systems that people are getting quite amazing healings with?
I have not had much experience with those. That's something people are going to, or they're putting in their house?
People do have them in their homes apparently, but most people are setting them up with 12, 16, 24 screens in a room. People are going in there and they have no more MS, no more this, that, and the other thing. Very high level scalar energy.
Well, if you think about it, like with PEMF, we're altering the voltage of the body in a positive way. So if it can be altered in a positive manner, it can also be altered in a negative manner. And, we're exposed. I read this several years ago, probably 4 years ago. I didn't write it down, unfortunately, but apparently there's an engineer who wanted to, convey to people the dangers of non-native EMFs, Wi-Fi, 5G, etc. And he has an app, and I'll have to see if I can find it, that converts, EMFs into sound waves, because that's much more profound. Because if you can turn it on and people hear, it's much more profound in getting them to realize, okay, this might be an issue. Someone asked me about dosages for carnitine and B5 and the differences between acetyl L-carnitine and carnitine. So the only difference the primary difference between acetyl L-carnitine and L-carnitine is when you acetylate something, as long as it's smaller than 10,000 kilodaltons, then it can cross the blood-brain barrier. And so it's going to help with neurotransmitter production, cognition, focus. L-carnitine, you always want to take it on an empty stomach. And that, we think of it as benefiting cardiovascular function, and it can, but you don't want to do massive dosages of it. And this is going to be, massive is going to be different for each person. But in general, I wouldn't do more than, say, 500 milligrams twice a day. I mean, you'll read dosages 4 times that amount, but the issue becomes when we have certain harmful bacteria in our gut, they take the L-carnitine. L-carnitine increases a molecule called TMAO. And when TMAO goes up, your risk of heart attacks and stroke goes up. So you want to be mindful of that. So I mean, I don't take L-carnitine, at least not at the moment, but I would never go above, definitely not above 1 gram twice a day, probably just 500 milligrams twice a day. And dosages for, I think that's about coenzyme, or no, B5. So B5, that's something that, it supports the adrenals and fatty acid metabolism, but you can do 1 gram or 1,000 milligrams twice a day as well. That's one you want to take with food. And so hopefully that answers your questions in terms of dosages for carnitine and B5. Someone said EMF opens the blood-brain barrier and the gut, interferes with intercellular communication and calcium channels. Yes. Yep. And so everything this person said, oh, that was you, Dr. Downs. My bad. Sorry, you're incognito there. But yes, everything's correct. I was like, wow, this person really knows. Architecture of radio is apt to hear, okay, architecture of radio. See, I love giving talks to people who are extremely smart, because then if I have a slip up or something, they catch me. Anything else?
My dogs just expressed their appreciation for the knowledge that you imparted to this household and to everyone else. And this will be placed on our website so you can share. And thank you, everyone. And as I said, our next meeting will be in June, on June the 13th. It'll be online. I'll be in Europe, so the time zones will obviously be earlier in the day rather than very late.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedule. I really appreciate it. And thanks for the very, very intelligent questions. I'm very thankful.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.